When Pastor Ernest first asked me to share my testimony, I thought, where do I start in my life? Some of you will know that we were raised in the United Church for a few years. And when I was 3 years old, my dad had a severe heart attack. And my dad drove himself to the hospital. And the doctor told him, Douglas, you will never see morning. So my dad said, if that's how it is, I'm going home to spend the night with my family. So he put his work boots back on and drove himself home. I don't remember a whole lot of that, but I do remember that my dad took all of us into the room. I'm only 3 years old. And he said something to each one of us boys. There's 4 boys. And I was the second youngest. Eric was still just a baby. But I remember very clearly my dad saying to me, James, look after your mother. That's the only part of that I remember. 1954, we were hit by a tornado. And again, I went out. I was a morning boy. I'm still a morning boy. I like mornings. I like getting up early. Good time. And I heard my dad downstairs, and I went downstairs, and my dad couldn't work because of his heart attack. But we walked out to see what all had happened. And I remember going into the barn with my dad on the top floor of our barn was completely gone. Looking down the hole, down into where the pigs were, and the little pigs were swimming in water in the bottom of the barn. I remember that as if like that was just like yesterday. I also remember busloads of Mennonites coming up. There was a bus in our yard within a day, and they were there to clean up. Our barn was completely rebuilt. That was in May 22nd, I think. It was written on the door of the barn. And the barn was ready for hay in July. The difference on this whole situation was my dad had no insurance. And my dad had no money. So when my dad had gone to the hospital, there was a minister there from the Church of God in Blythe, Reverend Glenn Beach. And Mr. Beach would go to the nurse or to the office to see who had been in to the hospital from the Blythe area. And within 3 days of my dad's heart attack, Reverend Glenn Beach was in our home. Well, my dad was not a Christian. My dad went to the United Church. I remember some of our Sunday school teachers when I was growing up that were Christians, and I don't know at what point in our life that we started to go to the Church of God in Blythe. I became a Christian at the age of 14. I was baptized the same year. We went to a church camp up in Durham, where New Tribes Mission or Ethno is now. That's the camp where we went to. That's where I was saved, was up there at that camp. At the age of 17, I came home from school at the end of the year, and my dad says to me, you can't continue on going to school and farming. I was doing all the farm work at home at nights, and if I needed a day off to plant crops, I took the day off. Some teachers accepted that. Some teachers did not accept that. So at the end of that year, Dad says, if you want to farm, you have to stay home and farm. At 17 years of age. At 17 years of age, you cannot get a loan. Some of you will know that very clearly. You can't get a loan. So my father said to me, if you stay with us and farm, we won't pay you any wages till you're 21. But at the age of 21, I will give you half interest in the farm. I thought it was a fair deal. So at the age of 21, as soon as I turned 21, I was into the bank. You know, where did this kid come from? Because I wanted to expand the farm. We only milked, what did we have, 15 cows? So I've gone out, at that time you could buy cows and quota together. So I went out and I bought 17 cows and quota. That was my first loan, right there.
What year would that be?
Oh, 21, so,
About 67.
no, it was before 67, yeah. Yeah. I'm 70, so that'll give you a good idea. So, from then on, any money that I made went towards the farm. I had a good uncle who also was my banker, and he helped me out a lot. And when my uncle moved into an apartment in Blythe, I helped him move out of his house, and I said to him, "Where is the copy of what I owe you?" He said, "There isn't a copy. If I die tomorrow, that money's yours." That's how I basically started farming. And by the time Marilyn and I took over, we were milking 45 cows. But there's a lot has happened between that time and the time we got married. My dad was a part of the Huron Christian Men Association, who owned Huron Chapel over there. And so at night, my dad hated to drive, and I'd drive him down to the meetings, and I would sit at the back of the basement in the church, listen to these men talk about, well, we're going to have Cleve Winger come to minister, and all these ministers that came on a regular basis to minister. Some of those ministers preached hell, heaven, hell, and brimstone, all this kind of stuff. You had the good ones, and you had the ones that spoke about the end times and all this. And I was sitting there one night at the back of the church, and Dave Ralston said to me, "Jim, come on up here." And at that time, I would have been 21. "Come up here, I want to talk to you." I said, "I'm not sure I do, Dave, but I will." So he said to me, "We need some younger blood on the board of the Huron Christian Men Association." And I wasn't sure that I was ready to be in with that class of men and be the only young fellow there. I said, "Well, let me think about it." And Dave, I don't know if you know Dave Ralston, but Dave gave me 5 minutes to make my decision. So I sat down at the table, and Dave says, "We're not quite done with you yet, Jim." And I said, "Ooh, I'm done." He said, "We need younger blood to chair the Huron Christian Men Association." I said, "Really?" So I was appointed chair of the board. So I was thrown into the fire quick and heavy. But Dave said, "I'll always be beside you, Jim. If you need advice, don't be afraid to come and talk to me." So it wasn't very long that I was a late bloomer. We didn't get married till I was 27. Ron Curl and Linda Curl were actually the pastors of the church over there. They pastored in Westfield and here. Ron Curl was a terrific friend to me in my teenage years and my early years in my 20s. And one Sunday night, we only had Sunday night services, and I used to look after Ron and Linda's twin girls. Ron would be preaching, Linda played the piano. And those two girls would come and sit with me. They were my girls. This one night, Marilyn was sitting in church, and she'd been arguing with her brother Gerald about my age. Gerald had told her, "Well, he's the same age as me." "Oh, he's far older than you." So this one Sunday night, she was sitting in church, and she kept looking at me. And I had twins, one in each knee. And I winked at her. And she blushed. Oh, she blushed. She still remembers that night. So it was a short time after that I called her up and asked her out. And we went to Youth for Christ. That was South Huron Youth for Christ, which held all their meetings in the Legion Hall in Clinton. Some nights you had men coming from down below up to join in on the service. Some of them weren't walking a straight line when they came up. But most nights they heard the gospel if they did come up. So I took Marilyn to Youth for Christ because I sat on the board. And they wanted a representative up in our area too. That was our first date. And our second date was, she didn't say any more than 10 words all night. Second date, she might have said 20 words. And I remember the third night. Now you have to remember, I'm farming. You didn't have a debit card or a credit card at that time in my life anyway. And I didn't have a whole lot of cash. So we had gone out and we'd walked down along the beach as far as we could and we'd walk back. We just walked around that night. And so coming home, I said, well, why don't we stop at the Sky Ranch? Which was really a very stupid thing for me to have said because I didn't have much money in my pocket. So I said to her, what would you like? And she said, well, I'll have a milkshake. So I get up to the counter and I look and I only have enough money for one milkshake. So I said to the girl, I'll have one milkshake, but I'd like 2 straws for that, please. So Marilyn was quite impressed with that. And that would have been the first night that I kissed her when I took her home. She said, this has been the best night of my life so far. So we dated for a year and a half, and we were married. Ron and Linda Curl, by this time, had gone to Haiti to be missionaries. Linda and Doran sang a lot together, but Doran had never sang by herself before that. So we had asked Doran to sing at our wedding. So Doran and Linda actually taped a couple of songs, but Doran actually sang herself for the very first time at our wedding. And Ron Curl finished off our reception with prayer on the tape. This was all pre-taped, which really made our day because those two had been very much part of our life.